Hey everyone, and welcome back to the PTG Rail Route Learning series. In this episode we're going to be taking another look at Train Sim World, and I'm going to be driving a journey on the recently released West Somerset Railway on a full run of the route between Minehead and Bishops Lydeard for a total journey distance of around 19.5 miles. The scenario that I'm using is called Land Cruise, and our stops along the way will include Dunster, Blue Anchor, Washford, Watchet, Doniford Halt, Williton, Crowcombe Heathfield, and finally Bishops Lydeard. Our train for this journey is formed of a Class 47 diesel electric locomotive in BR green livery with a rake of British Rail Mark I coaches in what is affectionately known as blood and custard livery. The Class 47 diesel electric locomotive was built between 1962 and 1968 by Brush Traction and British Rail Crew Works, with a total of 512 of these locomotives produced in several different subclasses. So with the different subclasses there are slightly different technical specifications for the locomotives, but the Class 47s weigh between 112 and 125 metric tons, and they have a maximum power output of 2,750 bhp or 2,050 kilowatts, which was later derated to 2,580 bhp or 1,920 kilowatts. They have a maximum tractive effort of between 55,000 and 60,000 pounds of force, which is 245 to 267 kilonewtons. They have varying maximum speeds, and the subclass that I'm driving today has a maximum speed of 95 miles per hour, though the maximum speed that we're going to be able to get up to on this journey today is 25 miles per hour, which I believe is the maximum permitted speed for all preserved railways within the United Kingdom. I'm starting this scenario in first person mode, so the first thing you need to do here is to actually get into the train. So let's just walk up to the door, and I'll need to click on the door to open it, press E to get into the cab, and then click on the door again to close it. Now if I press E to get into the driver's seat, I can now begin to set up the locomotive ready for departure. So the first thing I need to do here is to turn the master key, so I'm just going to click on that, and now I've done that I'm going to move the reversing handle all of the way into the forward position with the W key, so you can just see it moving there all the way up to forward. Now that I've done that, the next thing I need to do is press H to turn on the headlights. And if we go over here, I now need to move the brake handle to the minimal setting, so initial setting there, which is the correct position now. And so you can just see there the two needles on the right hand side falling, which indicates that I have just been releasing the brakes a bit there. When those two needles are pointing at 0, that means the brakes are fully released, and the higher the needles are pointing, then the harder the brakes are applied. So they're the main brake cylinder pressure gauges. Just next to the train brake handle, which controls the brakes on both the locomotive and the whole train, you can see we've got a locomotive brake handle, which I shouldn't need to use on this journey today. And if I now continue around the cab, you can see in front of us there the horn control, which is a two-tone horn controllable with the space bar and the N key. Now I'm not quite used to having N as the second tone of the horn. It's usually spacebar and B within Train Simulator, so I often still seem to be doing spacebar and B by default, so it may be that sometimes I don't do the horn quite like I intend to as I press B without thinking about it. Now if we continue around the cab here, you can see in front of us there we've got the speedometer measured in miles per hour. As already mentioned, the maximum permitted speed on this journey today is 25 miles per hour. Now continuing around, in front of us there we've got the throttle control. You can see it's got several settings: on, 1, 2, 3 and full. On the HUD for some reason it shows it as having 10 notches, but it seems that this doesn't actually have 10 notches in reality. So as I increase the throttle, you'll notice the ammeter in the top of the screen there will start to go up. You can see it says amps times 1000, and so the higher the amps, then the more traction current is being generated. As this is a diesel electric locomotive, the engine actually acts as a generator, generating electricity for the traction motors. Now the next thing I need to do here is I'm going to turn on the driver safety device, which is just behind us, and I've just got to try and remember which control it is. I think it might be that one. In fact, I'm just going to turn on the HUD for a second, and that's not the correct lever, that's the AWS changeover lever. I might be looking on the wrong side of the cab, so let's just go around the other side. That's better, and now I can see it. That, I believe, is the DSD isolation switch. There we are. So now I've turned that. Once I'm driving along, then you're going to hear some beeping every 30 seconds to 1 minute, which you need to reset with the Q key, and that just simply checks that I'm still alive, that I haven't had a heart attack, that I haven't fallen asleep, and that I'm still alert at the controls. Now the final thing I'm going to do in the cab before departure is simply to open the windows, as I do believe that it sounds better with the windows open. So I can open the windows on both sides of the cab there just by clicking on them. So now that I've done that, we are pretty much set up ready for departure. So let's just take another look outside the train at the fantastically rendered model here within Train Sim World, and then we can depart and head out towards Bishops Lydeard. Departing away from Minehead, the speed limit here is currently 10 miles per hour, with around 1 2/3 of a mile to go to our first stop, which is Dunster. And so now we've reached 10 miles per hour, I've just shut off the power to allow the train to coast. It will give us a little bit of power if I feel that we're losing too much speed. And then once we've passed the level crossing coming up just ahead, the speed limit will then be going up to the maximum line speed of 25 miles per hour. Now we've passed the crossing, the speed limit's going up to 25 miles per hour, and I can be sure that the rear of the train has cleared the previous speed section as we reach the foot crossing, which is coming up just ahead. Now increasing the power to accelerate up to 25 miles per hour, and I'm giving us a bit more power than I usually would, just to give us a bit of thrash so you can really hear those motors. Now we've reached 25 miles per hour, I've pulled the power right back to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. So I've just left us in a low power setting now, it should hopefully maintain the speed, but I will adjust the power if we start gaining or losing too much speed. Having driven this route through a couple of times now, I have to say that personally this is actually my favourite Train Sim World route that's been made so far. This isn't normally the kind of route that I would enjoy driving, but I really think that it's been very well put together and it looks quite spectacular. And I think that the rendering on the locomotive is particularly good as well. So I have actually recorded this video in 60 frames a second, however the frame rate seems to be a bit all over the place. When not recording I was able to get a fairly stable 60 frames a second. I was watching it when recording now and we're jumping between 45 and 60 frames a second. I'd say the average frame rate's around 50 to 52. So now that we've reached the track on the left hand side there, I'm shutting off the power as we've got a quarter of a mile to go to an upcoming 5 mph speed restriction. I'm going to apply the brakes for that speed restriction as we reach this point just here. So let's get the brakes applying. Slowing down slightly too early, just coming up on the 5 mph speed post there. And now I'm just going to give us a low amount of power as we're actually going uphill into Dunster station. It's not a very steep gradient, but it will cause us to lose a bit of speed. And when you're doing 5 mph, if you're even losing speed down to 4 mph, you're already going 20% slower. So I've now got to cruise at 5 mph to the other end of the platform here at Dunster. And then I'm aiming to stop right at the end of the platform. And so this should be just about the right place to stop. And then when you stop the train, you just need to press tab and then unlock the doors. So just need to click on unlock right in this case for the right hand side. Departing away from Dunster, the speed limit is 15 mph, though dropping to 10 mph for this crossing just here. And we've got around 1 3/4 miles to go to our next stop, which is Blue Anchor. I'd just like to mention at this point that a couple of years ago in Train Simulator I made a documentary video on this route called a route guide video, and it gives a lot of background information about the route, and for those who may be interested I'm going to post a link to that in the description of this video if you'd like to know more about the West Somerset Railway, the history of the route and about the places that we're visiting along the way. So now we've passed the crossing just there, the speed limit's going up to 25 mph and I can accelerate up to 25 at the 5th post that you can see on the right hand side after the, I think that's speed post or whistle post, you can see facing the opposite direction that we're passing just now. So I'm going to count 5 posts from there, and I'm going to go up to full power to accelerate up towards 25 miles per hour. And so we should be able to accelerate it around this point, so let's just go up to full power very quickly, again for the thrash. Now that we're reaching 25 miles per hour, I'm just cutting the power back. And in fact, in a moment, we're going to be on a downhill gradient of 1 in 118, which will cause us to accelerate a bit. So I'm just preparing to use the brakes, if required, to control our speed. So for those of you who are new to my channel, I'm Pete, the host of PTG Rail. I created this channel now nearly 4 years ago with the purpose of trying to make the most realistic train simulator videos available on YouTube. So I try and drive as realistically as possible. I create my own scenarios in Train Simulator to try and give the most realistic experience. And the purpose of these videos is just to help people to learn to drive without the use of any driving aids or the HUD, because real drivers don't have access to that sort of thing. The specifications of the computer that I'm using, because I know that this is a question that will be asked, as it's asked especially on every new Train Sim World video that I make. I'm currently using an Intel Core i7 4790K processor, which is running at 4 GHz, with 16 GB of DDR3 Kingston HyperX RAM running at 1833 MHz. And then finally, I'm using an NVIDIA GTX 980 graphics card. I've got the graphics settings here set to maximum, with the anti-aliasing set to, I believe it's TAA. So just use the brakes for a moment there, because we were gaining a bit too much speed. Now I'm releasing the brakes once again to allow us to accelerate back up towards 25 miles per hour, and then we'll increase the braking when we get to 25 to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. So at the end of this left-hand curve that we're currently on, we've then got around 2/3 of a mile to go to our stop, and the gradient will also be levelling out. Got a cautionary distance signal coming up on the right hand side here. At this signal we've got around 1/4 of a mile to go to an upcoming 15 mile per hour speed restriction, and I'm going to apply the brakes for that and slow for the 15 mile per hour restriction as we approach the home signal, which will be coming up in a moment. Can already just see the home signal in the distance, and the home signal is displaying a clear aspect. So with the distance signal there at yellow or cautionary position, that means that one of the home signals in this section is currently set to a danger position. It's not necessarily the next signal, it could be a following signal, and so on. In fact, right now I believe it's the signal at the other end of Blue Anchor platform. So I'm now slowing down for the upcoming 15 mile per hour speed limit. Slowed down probably slightly too early there, as it's coming into force just after the home signal that you can see just here. I also note that the home signals on this route are primarily of the lower quadrant variety, which was used in the western region. So lower quadrant means that when the signal is clear, it points in a downwards position, whereas upper quadrant signals mean that when the signal is clear, it points in an upwards position. But with both signal types, if the signal is in a horizontal position, then that means the signal is at danger. So we're actually going uphill into the platform here, 1 in 229, which is slowing us down a little bit. So I'm just giving us some power now to try and ensure that we don't end up slowing down too much. I really don't want to be entering the platform at less than 10 miles per hour. like we will be, as I'm now doing probably around 8 or 9 miles per hour. Just increasing the power slightly more. And you can now see the home signal ahead of us is at the horizontal danger position that I mentioned a moment ago. So here at Blue Anchor, the same as every other stop on this route, I'm aiming to stop at the end of the platform. So with the brakes on lightly now, just increase them slightly, and then this should be about the correct place for us to stop. So let's just unlock the doors on the left-hand side. Departing away from Blue Anchor, the starting speed limit here is 15 miles per hour, with just under 2 miles to go to our next stop, which is Washford. The speed limit will shortly be going up to 25 miles per hour, though just for a moment I'm just shutting off the power just to allow the train to coast. I can accelerate up towards 25 miles per hour as we've just passed the end of the mobile home park that you can see on our left hand side. And so once the final mobile homes are disappearing into the left-hand window, I can then accelerate up towards 25 miles per hour. We're actually going to be on some quite steep gradients between here and Washford, so I'm going to need quite a bit of power to maintain our speed. For now, let's just thrash it to 25. So just after this curve we're going to be going up 1 in 195, which is going to steepen to as much as 1 in 65. So I'm just increasing the power here as it looks like that we're starting to lose a bit of speed. And especially once the gradient steepens further, we're going to need quite a high power setting to maintain 25 miles per hour. Just accelerating a bit too much there, and it looked like our speed was just about to exceed 25, so I've just cut the power back a little. And I'm just going to keep a close eye on the speedometer to see what's happening there, and we are starting to lose speed again, so let's just give us a little bit more power now. I noticed that this route does have AWS ramps installed, but even if I turn on the AWS system with the AWS isolation switch, that actually the AWS doesn't work. So I don't know if that's for a future installation or something, or if it's just a case that it's not been simulated in Train Simulator. But please do let me know in the comments, because I'm quite interested to know what the story is with the AWS system on this route. So we're now on the steep upward gradient, and I've got the power quite high to try and bring our speed back up towards 25. As we reach this left-hand curve here, we've got around half a mile to go to Washford station. So now just looking out for overbridges on this curve. Once we reach the second overbridge, I'm then going to idle the power and start braking for our stop. So now just coming up on the second overbridge, the platform is coming up just ahead. So I'm now shutting off the power at this point. I've got the brakes on to slow down. The gradient here that we're still on will aid in our deceleration, and then the gradient levels out as we enter the platform. Slightly quick towards the end there, so I'll just increase the braking so that we can slow down and stop, hopefully in the correct position. And this should be roughly the correct place to stop. Probably slightly hard stop there for the passengers, so let's just unlock the doors on the right hand side. As we depart away from Washford, the speed limit is still currently 25 miles per hour, with around 2¼ miles to go to our next stop, which is Watchet. And at this point, I'm now going to idle the power as we've reached 15 miles per hour, as we're about to start on a downward 1 in 92 gradient, which in fact will cause us to continue to accelerate up towards the 25 mile per hour line speed. And then once we reach 25 miles per hour, I'm going to need to use the brakes to control our speed. There is one bug that I've noticed with this particular route so far, and that's when stopped at certain stations, I've noticed that the doors on one particular coach in the middle love being stuck open on the wrong side, so I'm not quite sure why that is. It looks quite silly, and I've made sure that I've edited this video so that you can't actually see that. So now we've reached 25 miles per hour, in fact we've probably just got up to 26 there. I'm now applying the brakes to control our speed to ensure that we don't break the speed limit. And as we reach the next right-hand curve, which is just coming up in a moment, we've got a quarter of a mile to go to an upcoming 10 mile per hour speed restriction. So we've now got around a quarter of a mile to go to the upcoming 10 mile per hour speed restriction, and that speed restriction comes into force at the start of the next left-hand curve, which will be coming up in a moment. In fact, I believe I can see the 10 mile per hour speed post just ahead, so I've now got the brakes on to ensure that we slow down for that. Due to the downward gradient here, I'm aiming to slow down to a bit below 10 miles per hour to try and ensure that when I release the brakes we won't end up breaking the speed limit. So we're just down to 10 now. So now let's release the brakes. And we're doing around 8 miles per hour at this point, and the train will quickly accelerate back up to 10, at which point I'm going to have to apply the brakes once again just to bring our speed back down. So I'm going to try and sort of hover between 8 and 10 miles per hour. As you can see here, the speed limit will shortly be going back up to 25 miles per hour. We're just about to pass the speed post. If you notice there's quite a tall tree on the left-hand side. So a few seconds after passing that tree, I'm then able to accelerate up to the new speed limit. Allowed our speed to get slightly too fast there, so just applied the brakes for a moment, but now we should be clear and we're able to accelerate back up to 25 miles per hour. I'm going to give us a low amount of power, although the train is still accelerating due to the downward gradient. I'm just going to bring our speed back up towards probably 17-18 miles per hour before shutting off the power here. Time to shut off the power and just allow the train to continue to coast up towards the speed limit. At the next right-hand curve coming up, we've got around 1 mile to go to our stop, and the gradient at this point is now down 1 in 123. So now we've reached 25, I've got the brakes on just to bring our speed down slightly. At the end of this curve, we've then got around a third of a mile to go to an upcoming 20 mile per hour speed restriction. At this next curve just coming up, the gradient has now levelled. In fact, it's about to start going uphill at 1 in 479 for a short distance. I'm just slowing down now for the upcoming 20 mile per hour speed restriction, which comes into force in a moment. In fact, I'll probably slow down slightly too early as I can just see the speed post coming up ahead. If I just allow the train to coast here, then we should be comfortably at 20 miles per hour. After we've passed this 20 mile per hour speed post, we've got a short upward gradient of 1 in 213 before a downward gradient of 1 in 76. So I believe we're now on the downward gradient. I've just shut off the power and I've got the brakes on now as we just reached around, I think, 21 miles per hour. So let's just bring us back within the speed limit here. As we enter this next left-hand curve, we've got a quarter of a mile to go to an upcoming 10 mile per hour speed restriction, which actually comes into force halfway along the platform at Watchet station. I'm going to apply the brakes for the 10 mile per hour speed restriction and our stop as we approach the upcoming overbridge. And once again, at Watchet station, I'm aiming to stop at the end of the platform. Just release the brakes momentarily to ensure that we don't stop too early. I'm going to reapply the brakes any second, just as we get a bit closer to the end. And I noticed that I've got the sound whistle boards here to tell me to sound the horn. There's no point until we start moving again, as the horn is for the crossings just past the station here. And so this should hopefully be about the right place to stop. Departing away from Watchet, the speed limit here is 10 miles per hour, with around 3/4 of a mile to go to the next stop at Doniford Halt. And we are currently on a level gradient, so I'm just accelerating to 10. I'm now going to shut off the power for a moment. The speed limit's actually going up to 25 miles per hour, and the gradient's also about to start climbing at 1 in 183. The thing is that I couldn't actually see a clear marker where I could say you can accelerate to 25 miles per hour by this point. So I'm just going to continue around this curve for maybe another 10-20 seconds, and then I'll start accelerating up towards the 25 mile per hour speed restriction. Some thrash once again. Don't think that in real life you would have normally applied power so much so quickly in a Class 47. But I really do love the whistling sounds of the motors on this locomotive. So now we're up to around 25. I'm using a fairly low power setting to try and maintain the speed as we are still climbing. At the end of this left-hand curve here, I need to start braking for an upcoming 15 mile per hour speed restriction, which comes into force shortly before Doniford Halt. So we're now just coming up on the 15 mph speed post. I've managed to brake to slow down in time, so we're now doing 15, and now I'm going to give us a low amount of power to try and ensure that we don't slow down too quickly. Doniford Halt station is coming up just after the overbridge, which you probably just saw. It's now just behind the tree on the right hand side there. As you can see, the platform here is quite short. I think in reality I probably stopped with the locomotive slightly beyond the platform, but in this game it seems to want me to stop with the locomotive just in the platform as the correct stopping point. Slowed down slightly too much. I had to give us a bit of power just for a moment to ensure we didn't stop too early, and now I've shut off the power. Now let's just apply the brakes, and this should be roughly the correct stopping point here. So here we are, Doniford Halt. Let's just unlock the doors on the left-hand side. Departing away from Doniford Halt, the speed limit here is still 15 mph, though it's very quickly going up to 25 mph, with just under 1 mile to go to our next stop, which is Williton. I do need to note here the cautionary distance signal, which does mean that one of the home signals ahead is of course currently at a danger aspect. So I can accelerate up towards 25 mph shortly after passing the distance signal there. So now I'm going to thrash it up to 25 and then cut the power back down once we reach 25. I ended up speeding very slightly there, so I just shut off the power. We reached around 27 mph, so let's get the brakes on to bring our speed back down. I'm not quite so worried about that as I would be in a normal route learning video, as I know that on preserved railways the speed limits aren't quite so strictly adhered to. I've certainly known in the past drivers doing 30 to 35 when they're supposed to be doing 25. So as we entered this left-hand curve, we got around a quarter of a mile to go to an upcoming 10 mph speed restriction, and so I'm braking now for the upcoming 10, with the signal there for the opposite direction being the main landmark for the upcoming 10 mph speed limit. Slowed down probably slightly too early, so I've just released the brakes momentarily. I can see the 10 mph speed post now coming up, which is right next to the home signal that you can see coming up here. So we're now down to 10 mph, so I'm going to give us some low power here to ensure that we don't end up stopping or slowing down too much. Here at Williton Station, as with all the platforms on this route, I'm aiming to stop right at the end. cutting the power back. I'm going to apply the brakes in a moment just to bring our speed down so that we can stop in the correct place at the end of the platform. And I also need to note here that we currently have a danger home signal. So this should be about the correct place to stop. Departing away from Williton, the speed limit here is currently 10 miles per hour, with just over 5.5 miles to go to our next stop, which is Crowcombe Heathfield. At this point, we're now starting on a climbing gradient of up 1 in 99, and in fact we're going to be climbing almost all of the way to the next stop, so I'm going to be having to use quite a lot of power here to maintain the speed. The speed limit here is now going up to 25 miles per hour, and I can accelerate shortly after we've passed this home signal here. Now cut the power back as we're approaching 25 miles per hour, and then I'm going to have to try and work out the best power setting to maintain this speed due to the uphill gradient. So as already mentioned, we're up 1 in 99, and that gradient is actually steepening to 1 in 84. So I've got the power setting here at a sort of medium power setting to try and maintain the speed. I do apologise if you just heard a loud motor there. That was a very loud car just outside my window. Unfortunately, this microphone is very sensitive at picking up background noise. So we're in a medium power setting. It looks like we're pretty much maintaining 25 miles per hour. I do know that the gradient is going to be shallowing at some point to up 1 in 126, so I'm keeping an eye on our speed so that I can adjust the power settings as required to make sure that we don't break the speed limit. What I'm looking out for now is the next overbridge, which marks around 4 1/3 miles to go. In fact, you can just see that coming up ahead. and at this overbridge the gradient will be levelling for a short distance before we start going uphill once again. So we're on a level gradient just for a brief moment here, and then at this next overbridge just coming up we're going to start going up again, initially at 1 in 133 before going up steeper to 1 in 100. I noticed with the jointed track sounds on this route that they've actually got it very accurate. With the Class 47, you can actually hear a duh-duh-duh sound, which is indicative of the Coco wheel arrangement of the locomotive, which means that there are 3 axles and 6 wheels on each bogie, for a total of 12 wheels on the locomotive, whereas with coaches you'd normally just get the duh-duh sound, because there's only 2 axles and 4 wheels on each bogie. Over the years I've played quite a number of iterations of the West Somerset Railway, initially in Microsoft Train Simulator way back in the day. I think around 2003-2004 was when the first version of this route that I played was released, and then in Train Simulator there's been more than one version made for Train Simulator, and then finally in Train Sim World. And I must say, of the 3, Train Sim World is certainly the most stunning looking. The route certainly has its issues, there's certainly a few bugs that need fixing, but overall this is a very, very enjoyable route to drive on. We're now coming up on Stogumber, or Stogumber Station, not quite sure exactly how it's pronounced, with around 2.5 miles to go to our stop at Crowcombe Heathfield. Seems that I've got a good throttle setting here as we're maintaining 25 miles per hour quite comfortably. I do still keep checking on the speed just to ensure that we're not going too fast or too slow. So what I'm looking out for now is the next post that says SW on it, which is after 2 crossings. At that point we've then got around half a mile to go to an upcoming 20 mile per hour speed restriction. Just reached the SW post there, which means that we've got half a mile to go to the upcoming 20 mile per hour speed restriction. I'm going to apply the brakes to slow down for that as I see the next signals coming up just ahead. So not the distance signal that you can see there, but the upcoming home signals. Now see these signals just there, so let's just apply the brakes and bring our speed down to 20 miles per hour. And now down to 20. We're still currently on the uphill gradient, so the train is going to continue to slow down, which is good for the minute, so we're not entering the platform too fast. Of course, I'm aiming to stop once again at the end of the platform here. And I can also see there that we've got a danger signal just ahead on the home signal, so I need to bear that in mind. and so this should be roughly the correct place to stop. And now we've stopped, let's just unlock the doors on the left-hand side. Departing away from Crowcombe Heathfield, the speed limit is currently 20 miles per hour with around 3 3/4 miles to go to our next and final stop, which is Bishops Lydeard. And that little piece of track you can see just in front of us that looks like a point is actually known as a catch point. And so what they do is they're set to derail a train if the train is not cleared onto the single track section like this just ahead. Sometimes it can be to derail a train coming from a loop onto the main line if the signal's not set to prevent a collision, because it's much better to have a low-speed derailment than a head-on collision between trains. So after the junction just there, the speed limit's now going back up to 25 miles per hour, and we can accelerate just after the overbridge there, but I'm actually not going to use any power at this point. So we're now going to be going downhill for most of the way to Bishops Lydeard. And we're currently on a down 1 in 81 gradient, so I'm going to need to use the brakes to control the speed along here. And we're now reaching 25 miles per hour, so I'm just going to make a low brake application. And I'll slow us down to around 21, 22 miles an hour, then release the brakes and allow us to accelerate again, and just keep repeating this cycle to ensure that we don't end up going too fast. For videos coming up soon, I'm actually planning on doing soon a video on the Vulcan Productions freeware route between Leeds and York, which is a route that I haven't yet covered. That will be in a pacer, unfortunately, for pacer haters. Nearly every train that runs along that route is currently a pacer. I think that'll be a nice route to cover. I'm also planning on covering the Arosa line in Switzerland, which I think will be a good one. And I've got a couple of German routes planned. I'm also hoping to cover Train Sim World on the New York route, the Northeast Corridor. And I'm hoping to do another American video, possibly on the Peninsular Corridor between Gilroy and San Francisco. So there's quite a few plans there. I'm not sure exactly when these videos will be made or which order they will be made in. Depends on how much Train Simulator wants to play ball. As quite often I plan to make a certain video and then I can't make it because Train Simulator decides that, hey, I want to crash, or say I was driving along and I saved the game and then I messed up somewhere and wanted to jump back, and Train Simulator decides, hey, I don't want the save game to work. Then I have to completely restart the journey over. I also haven't forgotten the Marias Pass route, which I've been promising for a long time. It's just very difficult to motivate to do a journey on that route, as it is such a long journey, and when I do the video it's going to be over 3 hours long. It will be by far my longest video, and the longest distance covered in any video on this channel. But I do hope to make a video on that this summer. So I'm trying to cover routes in different countries, but as I hadn't made any videos for a while, I just wanted to get back into making videos on British routes, which are of course my favourites, and sort of once I'm in the mindset for creating new videos, then I'm much happier to start creating videos for other countries' routes as well. A couple of other German routes that I particularly like to cover. One is between Innsbruck and Munich. On the Munich to Garmisch-Partenkirchen route, which is joined with the Mittenwaldbahn route from Garmisch-Partenkirchen through to Innsbruck. In fact, I travelled that route in real life back in March. I went on holiday to Munich and I was there for 11 days and got to travel on several different train journeys. Did Munich to Nuremberg, Munich to Innsbruck via Garmisch-Partenkirchen, and also Munich to Salzburg, which were all very good routes to travel on. Unfortunately, on the day that I went to Salzburg, the weather wasn't quite so good, so I didn't get some of the maybe nicer views that are available on that route. But certainly between Munich and Innsbruck via Garmisch-Partenkirchen, that was absolutely fantastic route. And so I think it's Danny joined the two routes on Steam Workshop, and I'm hoping that to be able to create a scenario to drive a full run of the route between the two places. And I'm also hoping to cover a Munich S-Bahn route. I think it's line S6 that runs between Tutzing and Ebersberg, which was actually a line that I travelled on quite a lot. And that's available through the joined Munich to Garmisch-Partenkirchen route and Munich to Rosenheim route. So there's several German videos that I'm hoping to make there, in addition to quite a few UK journeys and a few American journeys. I'm also hoping to cover some freight at some point, as I know that I don't do that very often, and it's quite often requested. And possibly a steam journey as well, as steam is something else that I haven't covered probably often enough on this channel. In fact, I think there's only one video that I've done in a steam locomotive. Now coming up on the distance signal protecting Bishops Lydeard station. So as we pass this signal, we've got around 1 mile to go to the stop and around 3/4 of a mile to go to an upcoming 10 mph speed restriction. So I'm now preparing to slow down for the upcoming 10 mph speed restriction. I'm going to apply the brakes for that as the next signals come into view, so I can now see the signals ahead. So now let's get the brakes on to slow down in time. downward gradient is meaning we are not slowing down quite as quickly as we normally would. I can now see the 10 mile per hour speed post coming up just ahead there. As we enter the platform here at Bishops Lydeard, the gradient then levels out. Once again, I need to stop at the end of the platform, though the end does seem slightly too far up. That's where the simulator wants me to stop, so that's where I'm going to stop. The route does actually continue slightly beyond here to Norton Fitzwarren, which is on the Bristol to Exeter route. But I noticed that no scenarios or services that have come with the with this route actually go all the way to Norton Fitzwarren. So we're now just approaching the end of the platform here. You can see a class, I think it's class 08 shunter just to our left hand side, which is the other train that comes with this route. I quite like the old shunters, but I didn't fancy driving one on this journey today, and I much prefer the class 47. And so here we are, arrival at Bishops Lydeard. Thank you very much for watching this video. I do hope that you did enjoy it. If you did, then please don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, please don't forget that for the latest channel updates, you can find me on Facebook. And I've put the link to my Facebook page in the description of this video. If you'd like to watch a documentary about the West Somerset Railway that I created within Train Simulator, then you can also find the link to that in the video description. And finally, if you'd like to sponsor this channel on Patreon, then please visit the Patreon link in the video description for more information. Once again, thank you for watching.